Welcome to another lesson for how to handle writing task 1 essays in the IELTS exam. And in this video, I'm going to share with you specifically how to deal with line graph type essays. So let's get started and begin to look at line graphs. When it comes to writing task 1, you have 20 minutes to write 150 words, and you really want to make sure that you accomplish this task in the time that you're given, and you want to take the time to take 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the most, to plan your essay, and then 15 minutes to write it. And it's far better to spend the time to plan your essay because you'll write a much better essay in 15 minutes than you will if you don't take the time to plan. So let's get started. And what I want to show you, first of all, is just an overview of what's required in writing task 1 when it comes to line graphs. And then we'll go step by step and on how to accomplish each part of the strategy for writing task 1. So we're dealing with line graphs, and what we want to first of all do is make sure we're clear on our task, know exactly what we have to do, the topic of the essay, and we'll do this by first of all taking a careful look and analyzing the question. And we see that in this graph we're going to be dealing with radio and television audiences throughout the day in 1992. And we're going to identify the main features of this graph so that we can write about them accurately. We're going to learn how to write an introduction, write our overview, and write our detail paragraphs. Because this is our task, we want to do 3 things. We want to summarize information, we want to select and report on the details, and we want to make comparisons where necessary. And we want to just take a careful look at the question so we know exactly what our task is, because task achievement is worth 25% before we even start writing, before our vocabulary and grammar even becomes a factor. 25% of our mark is how we structure and plan our essay. And if we do a good job of this, we won't have to be worry about writing enough. 150 words will be no problem. As a matter of fact, we'll have to be careful that we don't write too many words. So a good structure and plan will limit and make sure that we focus on what's really necessary when it comes to writing the essay. So our essay is only going to have 4 paragraphs. In paragraph 1, we'll have our introduction. In paragraph 2, we'll give our overview. In paragraph 3, we'll deal with the first main feature. And paragraph 4, we'll deal with the second main feature and make any comparisons and talk about the trends as necessary. So really, when we look at the question, we want to see that we do have that brief description of the graphic. This is going to come in handy because this will also help us when it comes to writing the introduction. And we want to be clear on the instructions. We're summarizing or giving an overview of the entire graph. We're picking out the main features and we're making comparisons. So these are our 3 main tasks when it comes to task achievement. Select the main features, write about the main features, and compare the main features. It's a simple structure. I'm not saying it's easy to write an essay. It comes with practice, but it's simple. And if we keep it simple, we'll be able to effectively manage the strategy and get the score that we need on the IELTS exam writing task 1. So as we begin to look at the graph, and we plan our essay, we want to make some notes as to what we'll include in our essay. And again, we want to take 4 or 5 minutes to do this so that we'll be able to write a very good essay in the 15 minutes that we have remaining. We'll write a much better essay in 15 minutes if it's well planned than we will in 20 minutes without asking these questions and making notes before beginning to write. As with any graph, we want to first of all look at the two axes. What information do we see in the axes? And in the x-axis on this graph, we have the percentages of the population. And in the y-axis, we have the days, the time of day that we're going to be describing. And the units of measurement are in percentages and hour by hour when it comes to the time of the day or night. And this also deals with our question about time periods. We want to look at the title and the labels. These are so important. And we can see that this graph is about radio and television audiences in the UK in December 1992. We want to look at the most obvious trends, and sometimes we can simply see these obvious trends by if we have any very high points in the graph or any very low points. And we can see also that we have our two lines are labeled on the graph, so we know that the lines with the longer dashes are for television and the shorter dashes are for radio. And then we want to look, are there any similarities? Are there any places where the graphs seem to come, where the lines seem to come together? And these help us to identify similarities. So what we want to do is we want to take these types of questions, we want to make our notes and have a good overall understanding of what we're going to write about in this essay. And then what we want to do is we want to select the main features. And in this graph, it's quite simple. We have basically two main features: the time when most people watch TV and the times when most people listen to the radio. So we know that these are going to be the two main features where we're going to describe the details in our detail paragraphs. And it's very simple in this case. We have two lines, one representing TV and one representing the radio. So it's very clear on how we're going to manage and describe this graph and share the information in our essay. So just a reminder of how we're going to structure our essay, what's going to be included, and we only have 4 paragraphs. So I'm going to take you step by step on how to write each paragraph for this essay. And first of all, we begin with the introduction. And this is a very simple thing to write. All we have to do is take the question, and this is the exact question that we're given for this graph. It says the graph below shows radio and television audiences throughout the day in 1992. So all we want to do is rewrite this question in our own words. We want to paraphrase. We want to use synonyms. And in doing this, just by paraphrasing or rewriting the question in our own words, we'll have our introduction. And it may end up looking something like this. The line graph illustrates the proportion of people in the UK who watch TV and listen to the radio over 24 hours from October to December 1992. So all we've done is paraphrase, taken a little information from the labels and title, and formed our introduction. And as you can see, the introduction isn't even a full paragraph. It's just one sentence, and this is all that's required for the introduction to our essay. Again, we want to be careful that we don't write too much. We won't get any extra marks for having extra words and extra paragraphs. We want to strictly stay with the task that we're given, and the introduction only requires one sentence for the first paragraph. In our second paragraph, we're going to give an overview of the entire graph. We're not going into detail here. We're just simply describing the entire graph and summarizing it. So here we're going to mention both the TV audience and the listening audience, and we're just going to compare them slightly and say that a greater percentage of the TV audience watched in the evening and a greater percentage of the radio audience listened in the morning. And that's all there is to this summary. And again, it's not a long paragraph, it's 2 sentences, but we've accomplished our task when it comes to sharing a summary or overview of the entire graph. And then we go on to paragraph 3. And in paragraph 3, we're going to deal with our first main feature, which is describing the details of people who watched TV. So we're saying that less than 10% of people watched TV in the mornings, but it increased rapidly, and the peak time for watching TV was in the evening. And on the line graph, you can see that great big hump where it shows the greatest number of people watching TV. So it's simply describing what happens with TV viewers. And then in paragraph 4, we're going to deal with what happens with radio listeners. And we're comparing it to the TV because we say radio, on the other hand, had a very different trend. Rather than most of the listeners listening in the evening, they listen in the mornings. So this is quite a contrast, and it's clear that we need to deal with it in this paragraph. And we're just mentioning some percentages and saying the times for peak listening times for the radio audience. So you can see it's a very simple process. It's a very clear process. And again, we only have 4 paragraphs. Remember, 25% of your mark is simply for this structure and making sure you accomplish the task. When we think about the task and completing the task, that's worth 25% of our mark. Our structure, in other words, clearly identifying the 4 paragraphs, is another 25%. So before you even get to grammar or vocabulary or worrying about that, 50% of your mark will come if you simply achieve the task and plan your essay carefully. And when we're finished, we come up with our complete essay, which is somewhere between 180 and 200 words. It's clearly enough words, but not too much. We don't want to go over 200 and write too much. So I hope you found this helpful. I want to wish you all the best in your IELTS preparation, and especially as you prepare for writing task 1.